Welcome to Justin's Morning Coffee. Okay, so what I want to talk about this time is a little bit more of our exploration of documentary film. Um, let's see. So if you go back a couple videos on my channel here, you'll see the lecture on the traditional documentary genres. And these are the genres that you would see if you went down the street to the old, famous old video rental place, Videotech. And these are the genre categories that they might use: expository, cinema verite, point of view, interview, and abstract poetic. Now, in my book, I go over the history of all of these and sort of how they developed over time. But the way that I kind of think about them now is that this is just the housing. This is kind of the surface level way of categorizing a documentary film, but really it doesn't say anything about the content. It doesn't really say anything about the meaning. What one theologian calls the power and meaning of the story is actually one level down from this. So that's what I want to talk about today. Okay, so I get this partly from Aristotle, partly from a theologian named Wesley Court. And this is basically, you take any story. So this works in, I'm using it for nonfiction film, but it works in pretty much any story. Any story could be a novel, it could be a fiction film, it could be a play. But every story is going to have four components, and it's going to have all four, but sometimes one of the four will become more prominent. So that's kind of what I want to convince you guys of today, is that you might be looking at a story that you're working on or a documentary that you're working on, and it behooves you to know, is this primarily a narrative piece, primarily a character piece, primarily an atmosphere piece, or primarily a viewpoint piece? So that's kind of what I want to go over with you guys. Now, the narrative, of course, is the plot, okay? This is what Aristotle said is the most important part of any story. That is what happens. This is the order of events and what happens in the story. The character, obviously, is who it happens to or who does the action, right? So the character is the who, and then the atmosphere is the setting, okay? But it's not just the physical setting, it's also the socio-political setting, right? It's the overall cultural setting where this takes place. And then the viewpoint is who's telling the story, or from which community does the story come out of, okay? So we've got narrative, character, atmosphere, and viewpoint. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to show you guys a short film, short documentary. I'm going to play it here real quick for you. And then after we've watched it, then we're going to talk about what those four elements are for this one piece. So this is a beautiful little documentary. It's about 10 minutes long. And so we're going to play it now.
I saw him in Delhi at the airport. The first time I saw him, I thought, oh, he's pretty cute. Walking?
Yeah, all right.
Walking is okay.
Nah, you gotta run it. I feel like a wuss.
The first time I met Shane was in the Himalayas, but mostly he was passing me.
It's funny, you never know how a run's gonna go when you start out, you know.
Where are you from? From Australia.
Okay, yeah.
You heard of Tasmania?
Oh yeah.
Remember the Tasmanian devil in that cartoon? Maybe Shane was the inspiration for that.
How can you meet Shane and not just like be drawn to him?
He's a very strong person, physically and mentally.
Always excited and crazy.
I don't know how he does it, but that's Shane.
Yeah, definitely crazy.
Yeah, gonna have a go at Grand Canyon. Running the Grand Canyon, so we're running parts of. Should be amazing. I'm really looking forward to it.
You know, he just seems to go from strength to strength recently.
He is so motivated. He is, like, I consider myself goal-oriented. His is to survive, and he has done an incredible job.
To have a second chance in life is pretty amazing. I mean, not
Many people really get to have that opportunity. Sometimes I feel, I've got this illness because I've got the strength to overcome it and to do something good with it. It's just not being...
What's going on?
Just a few spasms, that's all. But every time they'd hand me a wheelchair to sort of get around the hospital, I pretty much refused it. And there was a room full of doctors and they just would look at me with this, "You poor deluded bloke. Yeah, you don't realise sort of what's going on," but I just thought that they don't know me. What running does is it releases natural dopamines and chemicals down the spine that are basically natural opiates, and that counteracts the signal what's going on with SBS.
He would have like this weird stuff happen to him, like the spasms, and then just be gone. So he literally thought he was going to die, and I think if he had not started running and doing his own rehab program, he would probably be dead.
No, mediocre pain for a few months, and yeah, it just got to the point where I just had to ask my girlfriend at the time to take me to the hospital. What was happening was minor spasms, like imagine getting a piece of wire and just slowly wiggling it until it fractures and breaks, and I ended up with a fractured back. My girlfriend at the time basically watched me have spasms on the floor like a fish out of water, just flapping around for 2 weeks, and she basically said F this and walked away, which I don't blame her one little bit,
The immune system can occasionally make a mistake, and if it targets these inhibitory neurons in your spinal cord, then it can damage them, and it can result in this hyperexcitability at the spinal cord level. It would cause terrible, debilitating muscle spasms, clenching of the jaw, arching of the back, complete inability to relax the muscles.
I was just a skeleton in skin. It just stripped all my muscle fibre. It was just really going to town on me.
Many people don't know what stiff person syndrome is. They've never heard it. Rare diseases are also called orphan diseases. And the reason is because there's no funding to study them.
The ballpark estimate is about a 1 in a million, maybe a couple per million people have the stiff person syndrome.
An absolutely horrendous, horrible, nightmarish disease.
Really excruciating, to the point that I used to wake up screaming back in the day when it was sort of SBS had hold of me, before I started getting on top of it and controlling it through running.
When he called me, he said, "I've started to run. I run along the beach."
One morning when I just woke up, I was just so sick of continual muscle spasms, and it was just constant, just one after another. So I decided to fight back every time I had a muscle spasm. I'd flex as hard as I could in that area, like 10 times the amount. So if I had one muscle spasm, I'd do 10 times. If I had 3, I'd do 30, until I ended up doing 300 that morning, and they stopped, and that's when I first realised that I had half a chance of defeating this illness. It was like winning a round against someone like Muhammad Ali, like an opponent that you'd think this is impossible to get a victory, but I realised that I was getting a victory by doing that. So that was the start of a little bit of glimpse of hope. There's no way that any event could be as tough as what my own rehab was. You don't realise how strong you are sometimes until you're put in that position.
He's a big surprise. He really is. And he's just the type of person who can inspire a lot of people.
It's freedom like you would not believe. The more I do, I keep getting stronger. As far as the ultra running community, and they inspire me because they've got out and done it without having anything wrong with them, or an illness where it took me to get really sick and to have that second chance.
He's just having a great time out there.
His whole, just amazing that he can be so upbeat and so happy despite what he's going through.
I just don't get it. Life's too short, life's too precious. Life is really precious, and just to give up it just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't register.
Okay. So, yeah, what an interesting film. Okay, so now if you want to think about my categories here, so we've got plot, character, atmosphere, and viewpoint. Okay, so now if I was teaching a class, I would open up it to questions, and I'd say, okay, now tell me what all the four of those are. Okay, obviously, who's the character? It's Shane. That is the character that we're exploring in this documentary film. The person diagnosed with SPS who uses running to deal with his illness. Okay, but now what about the other parts? Now, what's the plot? The plot is that he started out as being in despair. He started out being lost and basically one foot in the grave. The illness basically had control over him. Okay, and then he discovers something. He discovers that he has a fighting chance, as he puts it, and then he starts to run. Okay, so it's a very simple plot. All right, and then what's the background? What is the atmosphere? All right, now the atmosphere, you could say, well, it's the landscape that he's running through. Okay, that's true on a physical sense. But what about the socio-political landscape? Okay, what's the atmosphere of this? Well, it's the context of dealing with supposedly uncurable diseases, right? So this would be in the category of, this is SPS, but it could be anything else. You know, it could be Alzheimer's, it could be ALS, it could be any one of these diseases that we don't have a cure for. Okay, so this is in that kind of category. Okay, and then what's the viewpoint? Well, it's basically from his point of view, right? He's the storyteller. He's the one who's telling us, here's what I did, right? It's not a narrator saying that. It's not someone else. There's the interview material there is to lend credibility to what he says, right? To lend authority to what he says. So he's the one saying, here's what happened to me, okay? And then we add in that interview material to sort of say, confirm it. Yeah, his story checks out, is kind of what it is. So, okay, now, that might seem a super, super simple thing for you, but now think of it this way. What if we were to tell that same story, but use one of the other four elements? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up those elements again so you can take a look. Okay, so the narrative is the what. Okay, here's a person who overcame his degenerative disease through running. Okay, the character is, this is Shane, the guy from Australia specifically who did this thing. Okay, the atmosphere is the background of what to do when you have a degenerative disease, or what should we as humans do in the face of disease and death. It's a you know, that's the background. It's the philosophical, socio-political background. And then the viewpoint is this is from Shane's point of view. What if we were to tell it a different way? What if we wanted to make it an atmosphere piece primarily? Okay. Now, in this case, I think probably the narrative is front and center, and then the character is secondary, right? The most important thing is what he did, right? If it wasn't for the fact that he was doing those things, it wouldn't be worth making a film about, right? So the narrative is first, and then the character is second, and then the atmosphere is third, right? Generally. Again, like every story has all four of these elements, but it's kind of worth it to think, okay, what if we were going to make the atmosphere first? and then the narrative, and then the character, right? So if it was atmosphere first, and we said, okay, this is going to be about stiff person syndrome, SPS, then we might not have it be just about one person. We would show a variety of people. So it'd be like about Shane would be one component, and then we'd show someone else who has the same disease and how they deal with it, someone else who has the same disease and how they deal with it, right? And then we're going to get, basically now this is a documentary about stiff person syndrome. It's not just about this one person. See how then the atmosphere would go to the front, okay? The narrative would fade to the back, the character would fade to the back, and the atmosphere would go to the front, okay? What if you wanted to tell it in terms of just character, and the narrative isn't as important, right? Then maybe you wouldn't be telling the story of Shane. You would be just showing what his life is like. You would be just following him throughout the day, something like that. So you can see that certain subjects lend themselves to one of the four as being primary, and then another one secondary. So they kind of stack up, and you can tell them in different ways. You can tell one a story with the narrative as primary, one with the character, one with atmosphere, one with viewpoint. So that's just one example. All right. So the narrative. All right. So what's the distinctive about narrative? Okay. If you're telling a story where the narrative is primary, then you're going to focus on the events, and it's the importance of plot, and it's what those events mean. So in this case, Shane had the disease, then he discovered a solution, and now he runs. Okay, boom, boom, boom. It needs to be told in that order. Now, it's kind of funny to say. It seems so trivial. If you're doing a narrative piece, you have to tell it in the right order. The order is super important, right? And you think, well, yeah, of course. But as you'll see, as we move into character pieces, the order is not as important. Okay, so this is a famous movie that did really well called Searching for Sugar Man. Okay, and this is another one where the order of events is the most important part. So let's take a look at this trailer.
If I had to name 10 artists that I've ever been involved with, Rugby used to be in the top 5.
He's my most memorable artist.
Bob Dylan was mild to this guy. He was this wandering spirit around the city. When he opened up and sang, he went, whoa, this guy's got it.
We expected big things, and they did absolutely nothing.
How many records do you think he sold in America?
In America, 6.
Nobody had even heard of him. How can that be? How can that be?
It's a bit of a mystery how the first copy of Cold Fact came to South Africa, but to us, it was one of the most famous records of all time. He was the soundtrack to our lives.
Bigger than Elvis.
Much bigger than Rolling Stones. Any revolution needs an anthem. The message it had was be anti-establishment. The first opposition to apartheid, they were influenced by Rodriguez.
Nobody knew anything about him. He was a mystery.
Then we found out that he had committed suicide.
The story differs a lot, and a lot of people have different versions of the story.
He set himself alight on stage.
He reached down and pulled up a gun and pulled the trigger. I thought it'd make a good story, find out how Rodriguez died.
So we started looking quite deeply at the lyrics.
And one day, just by accident, I found it. What I thought was the end of story was actually just the beginning, and the best part was still to come.
Said wanted, and have you seen this man? Matter of fact, I have seen him before.
Sounds like something you would make up if you were bragging on some dream or something.
It didn't work out, but don't ever doubt how.
He's like a wise man, a prophet, way beyond just being a musical artist.
He had this kind of magical quality that all genuine poets and artists have. I think he's representative of the human spirit, of what's possible.
This is all too strange to be true. These are the days of miracles and wonder.
Okay. So that would be a plot piece. Okay. Now, if you've seen the movie, the revelations come and each one reveals an aha moment. First, the filmmaker discovers that there was this musician from the 1960s that was famous in the 1980s in South Africa and completely obscure, not famous in America. And then he hears these rumors about how he's gone, he died. Let's find out why. Let's find out what happened, right? And then he goes to South Africa and he starts to piece together the story, and then eventually you get a nice surprise ending, which I won't spoil for you. So you notice that it has all four parts, right? It does. Who's the main character? It's this guy Rodriguez. Okay. What's the plot? Well, he was obscure in America. He became famous in South Africa, etc. Right? What's the background? Well, it's the background of South Africa, interest in music, American music in the 1960s, the two different cultures of South Africa, apartheid period in the 1980s versus America, and how these things kind of came together. That's the atmosphere. And then who's the viewpoint? Well, it's from the point of view of the filmmaker. See, in this case, it's not the character who's telling the story. It's the filmmaker who's telling the story. He's the one who's following these threads and piecing together all this information about this character of Rodriguez, right? So basically, that means that the plot is the mechanism that he used to get into this subject. So you can think of it that way, right? Are you using character to get in? Are you using atmosphere to get in? Or are you using plot? He chose to reveal the information in a certain way so that we're following a story thread. Okay. So again, what's the importance of plot? Focus on the events and then the meaning of those events. That's how you tell the story. Okay. So what about the next section, character, the who? All right. Now, what if you wanted to do a film and it's not so much about the order of events? Maybe we already know the order of events. This is something that happens quite often when you want to do a piece about somebody who's already famous. Rodriguez, of course, you've never heard of before, so you need to know the story. But what if you already know about the person? Then the central dramatic question is not what happened, since we already know that story, but rather, what's the essence of this person? What makes so-and-so who they are? So a lot of celebrity bios are done this way, and it's kind of more of an exploration into what does it take to be that person, or what makes that person tick. So this is less about the order of events. You could reveal the order of events of their life in any order. You could show them when they're old, and then cut to when they're young, and then cut to when they're middle-aged, or whatever you want to do. You don't have to tell it in order. And a lot of times, again, as I say, that's because we already know the plot. This is a couple of filmmakers talking about sort of how they view character and how they sort of pick someone to be the focus of a character piece.
In a way, you're casting. When you go out and you meet people, you're assessing the level of interest you think that they will have for the audience. How engaging are they? How articulate are they? What are their particular interests and quirks? What is it about them that makes them fascinating to you?
No, I'm not ready, and I've no makeup on. But things are getting better.
There we are outside the house with Edie in this decaying old mansion with a mother inside. It's important that you choose someone that you can connect with. And hopefully things will happen that were not predicted specifically before you got into it, but things would take a turn toward a story.
Pressing, and when it sets in here, because I don't like the country and I don't want to be here. Any little rat's nest in New York, any little mouse hole, any little rat hole, even on 10th Avenue, I would like better.
Any little rat hole in New York. That's the famous Albert Maysles and Grey Gardens, one of the most successful documentaries of all time. So basically, these filmmakers are saying, okay, this is an interesting person. This is a compelling person. If you go back and watch Grey Gardens, there's very little plot. You know, they're not talking about how these people came to be where they are. You know, but rather that we're just observing them in their environment, and we just very light sketches of who they are and where they came from and what the major events are in their life. Now, if you want to see the Grey Gardens told as a plot piece, you can watch the Drew Barrymore movie of Grey Gardens, and that will be the order of events that led to them living in this dilapidated mansion in the Hamptons. And so you can see how basically the original documentary, the Maysles brothers went to this mansion and they filmed these two women for 2 weeks, and they made a documentary, a cinema verite documentary about it. But that was the way that they chose to tell the story, right? You could tell the story with a narrative, and then it's going to look very different. So it just behooves you to know which element of the story that you're looking for. Okay, so as I said, oftentimes if someone's already famous, if we already know the story, then that lends itself to a character piece, right? And because we want to know, like, we've already heard the story, now we want to know, what's the deal with this character? How do they accomplish what they accomplish? How do they do what they do? You know, so there's a sense that the character exploration is one step deeper from plot. So a lot of you guys remember, I'm sure, the very famous ESPN docu-series about Michael Jordan. This is a little glimpse into it, and as you'll notice, there's something about this, I think, that really shows what the essence of a character piece is.
That's waterproof color right there. That's waterproof.
Our biggest challenge is us.
I am cursed with this mentality of competitiveness.
Competition was an addiction.
Every day was a battle.
Dennis, get up here.
Boom. They don't hear and see Dennis for 48 hours.
No matter what we did, it seemed like it was a story.
Scotty was being selfish.
When the trust is broken, it's sort of shocking.
I never hated Scotty.
6 championships in 8 years.
We were the greatest team ever.
What time is it? I'm gonna ridicule you until you get on the same level with me.
That man getting a free run at me.
It was his team.
My mentality was to go out and win at any cost.
We want to keep this excellence going.
Unbelievable. Done it again.
Once you reach the top, where do we go from here?
At some point, the team is not going to meet the expectations.
The most famous man on the planet is here.
Okay. So we all know who Michael Jordan is. Michael Jordan is the most famous person on the planet, according to Oprah Winfrey, right? And so if you're going to make a docuseries about Michael Jordan, are you going to tell the events in the order that they're going to happen? You're going to start with rookie Michael Jordan, second year Michael Jordan, third year Michael Jordan. You could do that. And maybe that would be perfectly legitimate, because maybe there's a generation of people that don't know the order of those events, and that would be great. But rather, what these filmmakers at ESPN decided to do was make it a character piece. And so what they decided to do was say, okay, let's show King Michael Jordan, 1997 Michael Jordan, when Michael Jordan is on top of the world, and there's that iconic low shot of him, low dolly shot of him up against the window. He's an icon. He's an idol. He's a god, or something like that. And then cut back to rookie Michael Jordan, and cut forward again to 1997 Michael Jordan, and then cut back to second year Michael Jordan, right? So the order of the events in his career are secondary. What's primary is we're cutting around and we're seeing, okay, how did Michael Jordan become Michael Jordan? What is it about Michael Jordan that makes him King Michael Jordan? So you're juxtaposing rookie Michael Jordan with King Michael Jordan, you know? And that gives us a kind of a picture. It gives us a picture of the essence of who Michael Jordan is and what made Michael Jordan so great. You know, what makes Michael Jordan Michael Jordan. That's kind of the main issue that happens with these character pieces. Okay, so what's the essence of a character film? Okay, you're casting. You are choosing somebody who is interesting. And you're really trying to get at what is the essence of that person. You're kind of peeling back the layers of the onion. Okay, and it's different from the plot-based film. So here's another example. This is a film which was so fun to see at Sundance about 10 years ago now. It's called Exit Through the Gift Shop, and there's a famous street artist named Banksy who supposedly made this film. He's an anonymous, nobody knows who he was, and he was nominated for an Academy Award with it. And everyone was worried that if he did win the Academy Award, would he show up to accept his reward? And he was at Sundance when it premiered, and in the middle of the night, he went and he painted one of his pieces on one of the walls at Sundance, which I see every year that I go. And there's a couple of Banksys actually in Park City, Utah, where the Sundance Film Festival was, that he made his presence known. But anyway, so he's shrouded here. He's anonymous. But let's just take a look at his film, and see how this interaction between plot and character plays itself out.
The film is the story of what happened when this guy tried to make a documentary about me, but he was actually a lot more interesting than I am. So now the film is kind of about him.
This guy was Terry Goetta, a Frenchman who had been living in Los Angeles since emigrating to the United States in the early 1980s. But there was one very unusual thing about Terry. He never went anywhere without a video camera.
He was like more than any drugs to anybody. He was obsession. Can I take one picture and I go? One and I go.
No.
Yeah?
One picture.
Yeah?
Go ahead.
All right, thanks.
Don't you go film someone else?
Yeah, I do.
Hey?
I do.
Why don't you go and do it now?
Because it's not every day that I see.
Terry seemed happy enough pointing his camera at anything that moved. Until in 1999, on a family holiday to France, a chance discovery sent Terry's life in a dramatic new direction.
My cousin, at that time, he was artistic, you know. He was putting mosaic together and trying to do the game of Space Invaders, recreating the character kind of way. So I filmed him.
Terry's cousin was Space Invader, a major player in an explosive new movement that would become known as street art. This hybrid form of graffiti was driven by a new generation using stickers, stencils, posters and sculptures to make their mark by any means necessary. Street art was poised to become the biggest countercultural movement since punk. And Terry had landed right in the middle of it.
I wanted to make a movie about street art, so I wanted to get as much people as possible.
Terry's documentary was shaping up to be the authentic inside story of the birth of a movement, starring the biggest figures in the street art world, with one exception.
I hear about this Banksy. Who's Banksy, this. And I said, I really like that guy. you know. And it's like I want to interview this guy.
So I went to Los Angeles in about spring 2006, and I rang the only person I knew in Los Angeles and asked them if they could help me. And they said, well, there's this French guy, he's the cousin of Space Invader, and he knows where all the best walls are in LA. He can help you out.
Circumstances had conspired to bring Terry face to face with the notoriously secretive artist.
It was magic that this person let me film. I felt like I had the piece that will finish the puzzle.
Okay. As you can see, there's a lot going on with that film. Now, if you want to see the whole story, the whole picture, the whole portrait of Terry and Banksy, then you have to watch the whole movie. But you get a good picture of kind of what it is here. Banksy says it right in the very beginning. He says that Terry turned out to be more interesting than me, he says. And so now the film was about him. Okay. So you do need to know, now it's not like Michael Jordan, where we all know who this person is. We did need a little bit of narrative in order to introduce the character of Terry, this French guy that likes to videotape everything that he sees, okay? But he's a character in the sense that he's enigmatic, he's quirky, he's got these qualities that hold our attention. And Banksy recognized that, and he said, okay, let's just structure the film around this figure, this person. What is it about him? Okay. Now, again, it has a narrative. You need to know the order of events that brought Banksy and Terry together. Okay, but as you move into the middle and the third part of the movie, you're really delving into the character of Terry if you go watch the film. Okay, and then so it has a narrative. It has, of course, Terry is the main character in it, but it has a background too. It has an atmosphere. What's the atmosphere? The atmosphere is the world of street art, the world of contemporary art in the urban setting. Okay, so think of it this way. There's another documentary out there, and it documents the street art phenomenon. That would be an atmosphere piece, right? So if it showed Shepard Fairey, and if it showed Space Invader, and if it showed Banksy, and it showed all of these different figures within that world, and didn't focus too much on any one of them, but just kind of showed how each one does their art in these urban settings. Okay, that would be an atmosphere piece. You say, well, that's an atmosphere piece. This one, that's the background, but this is the character. It's a character piece about Terry. Okay. So here's another way to think about the character piece. This is Euro Dreams of Sushi. I got the chance to talk to the cinematographer and the director right after they made this movie. I happened to do a Google commercial with them and talked about their approach to it. And in this case, this is perhaps, arguably the best sushi restaurant in the world. And you've got this chef of the restaurant, Euro. And the question again is, what makes Euro the best sushi chef in the world? What makes him tick? Okay, so let's take a look at this one, and we'll sort of see another example of a character piece.
今仕事しててこの年になって完璧だとは思っていないからね。
親父さんまだ悔いがあるったらおかしいよでせがれがかわいそうだから早く譲ってあげてって
ずっとまあ親父さんがやっていければそれでいいんですけれども、そうはいかないですから、いつかは交代しなきゃいけないですから。
そこまで頂上まで行けば完璧かもわかんないけど、じゃあこの頂上はどこかっていうとわかんないわけですよ。
抜いてやっと並んだ。そのぐらいやっぱり親父の影響ってそんなもん。
やりたが夢だったっていうのがありますよ。こうやったらいいかなって夢でしょあれ。やるってことは非常にいいことじゃないかなと思います。
父はもう二郎さんと亡霊がもうそこら中にあるから。
好きにならなきゃダメですよ。それ自分の仕事に惚れなきゃダメなんですよ。
二郎さんのところのお任せコースはコンチェルトになってる。三楽章に分かれてるんですね。もうマグロだとか小肌だとかクラシックなお寿司が第一楽章にあって、ちょうど真ん中の第二楽章のところはその日に取れたものを二郎さんが順番毎朝決めてるから、冬なら冬、夏なら夏、それしか築地で入って、
Okay. Yeah, I think you get the idea here. All right, so Euro Dreams of Sushi. It's a great film. It really is. It's just so entertaining to watch, and just everything that Euro does to achieve that greatness. There's so much going on in the movie. Okay, so let's look at our 4 parts again. Okay, what's the plot? Well, there's very little plot. He's a sushi chef. That's pretty much the whole plot. And then the rest of the film is just observing his interaction with his 2 sons, his interaction with his culture, and just how he is who he is, how he achieves greatness at being a sushi chef. So there's very little plot, and of course it's a character piece, so it's about Euro, what makes Euro tick. Who is Euro, right? And then what's the atmosphere? What's the background? Well, it's really Japan and the world of sushi, the world of the chef. And so you could say that a lot of times these things, it's about character. That's what's in the foreground, but it says a lot about the background. There's a lot of commentary about the background. What you see in the film is the relationship between fathers and sons in Japan. This really real incredible drive for excellence that they have in Japan, and the desire to pass on that level of quality and level of excellence. The son is 45 years old and thinking, someday I won't be the apprentice anymore, and I'll finally be able to have my own restaurant. And then whose point of view? Well, it's not from Euro's point of view. Right? It's from the filmmaker's point of view. They're not speaking in the film, but they're the ones telling the story. So you can see, sometimes one of these things will move to the foreground. And then in this case, you just need to know who he is. You need to know what the restaurant is like. And then that scene that I showed you from is a critic who is explaining the excellence of the courses of Euro. And notice how they had the classical music playing, almost like this is a symphony of sushi that he's making. And they're really kind of exploring just the excellence of this sushi, pretty much shooting it with shallow focus, on the red camera, with very well lit and elegant, almost like a product. In fact, the DP who shot that is a product, professional product photographer, cinematographer. So that's part of what's going on here with character. All right, so what about atmosphere? Now we've touched on it a little bit, but what if your movie is going to be completely about atmosphere? Very little plot, very little in the way of character, and less focused on point of view, but rather what's the atmosphere? What would a film like that look like? The socio-political environment, the time period, the setting. Can you make a whole documentary just about that? Well, here's an example.
For Bones of the Forest, Heather and I were trying to give you an experiential sense of the beauty and grandeur and subtlety of the old growth forest, so that you could actually feel for yourself and how important they were to save. And in order to express that fully, it seemed that we needed to go outside the usual palette of just solid standard nature shots. We wanted to actually show you also the time of the forest, which has its own pace. So time-lapse photography was part of that. It's not eye candy. It's not just special effects. It's really about trying to break through pattern thinking and allow us a fresh perspective on something.
Okay, so you see, he wanted to make a film about the old growth forest. So he used time-lapse photography. There was very little human beings in it, very little character. You could say that the forest itself was a character, you might say, but really it's about the whole environment there. And so that's going to obviously lend itself to different techniques than would a plot piece or a character piece. Here's another example.
When I was first contemplating water, one of the key things I was thinking about is how does water shape us? And then how do we shape water?
Okay, so similar to the old growth forest, here's a film about water. How does water shape us and how do we shape water? The interaction between human beings, the human race, human civilization, and water, right? And so in that case, the logic of the order of events that you're going to use, the logic of the scenes that you're going to choose, they're not going to be based on, we need to show some kind of a plot that's unfolding. Now, there may be some kind of a very, very loose plot in the sense of, when humans first started to shape water, etc., right? You might be able to tell it that way, but that's not what they chose to do. They pretty much went out throughout the world, and the one common denominator in each one of these little scenes that they shot was some kind of interaction between human beings and water. But you could probably watch the film with all of the scenes in reverse order. I mean, it doesn't really matter what order they're in. This is just they're all coming together, and they're building this kind of mosaic of scenes about water. A lot of times, this is a little bit of a more subtle way of filming. It's a different logic than narrative logic. It might be a little bit more concept-based, high concept-based, intellectual, heady, artistic, whatever you want to call it. But this is a very legitimate form of documentary as well. And in fact, there's even fiction films that are atmosphere-based films. You just have to know what you're in for. You have to clue the audience in what they're in for. Here we're not going to give you a narrative. And you need to kind of communicate that right at first. And then they'll be able to sit back and kind of enjoy the intellectual ride as opposed to the plot. Okay, so hopefully that all made sense. Now, the very last of the 4 elements is viewpoint. Now, that is who the storyteller is. Okay. Now, this does make a lot of difference when it comes to the power and meaning of a piece, because sometimes the value of the story is actually who's telling the story. It's telling you, if I'm telling you a story, I'm saying, here's my experience. This is life as I see it. And what I see and who I'm interacting with and the background of it isn't so important as the fact that it's me telling you that this is what interests me. I'm the one directing your attention. Or it could be, you could think of it as coming out of a certain community. You think of the story of the Exodus, right, in the Bible, and that's the story from the perspective of the Hebrews. If it was told from the perspective of the Egyptians, it would be a totally different story, right? So a lot of times, sometimes if you're working on something, you have to assess what's important here. Should it be told from my point of view? Should I be the storyteller, or am I assisting someone else in helping them tell their story? And if so, that's going to change a lot of the decisions that I make when I go to construct the film. Here's an example of something that has to be told from the perspective of a certain person, from the storyteller, in order for it to even have value to us.
من یک خانواده بسیار بسیار مذهبی به دنیا آمدم. کات من فیلم ساز شدم. کات من فیلم درباره یکی از کماندانای طالبان ساختم. بعد از نشر فیلم مشکلات با طالبان. کات فرار به یک کوهستان.
راستی کمک گفتن به انگلیسی چی میشه؟ خاموش کنم.
Okay, so this is a story. It's a documentary called Midnight Traveler by a filmmaker from Iran who was kicked out of the country and him and his family became refugees. Now, the power and meaning of the story, the importance of the story, is that it is told as kind of an on-the-ground, cinema verite, observational point of view piece about what it's like to be a refugee. So you're basically put in the shoes of someone who has lost their home. And that's really that's what makes the story important. That's what makes the story meaningful. And you can't, I mean, of course, again, there is a plot to it because it follows their journey along. And there is a character, and it's him and his family. That's the main character. And there is a sociopolitical background and atmosphere, which has to do with this phenomenon of being a refugee and not having home and having to find your way in the world without a country. But the point of view is very, very important. It couldn't really be told from someone else's point of view. It needed to be told from the filmmaker. And so that's why I would put this as a point of view piece. And really, the reason to bring this up is to point out it's worth thinking about. If you've got a story that you want to tell, is it from your point of view, or is it from someone else's point of view? And then you should really honor whoever that is. If it's a certain community, if it's a certain person, honor that point of view, because that's really the heart of the piece. Okay, so let's take a look at one more piece. This is a film called Trouble the Water. And it's basically from the point of view of someone that was in the storm, the Hurricane Katrina, during the flooding in 2004 in New Orleans. Another example.
My name is Scott Michael Roberts. This is my wife, Kimberly Roberts. We're from New Orleans, the Ninth Ward, underwater. They said on the news that it's like aiming toward Mississippi, so we might get the outskirts.
That's the sky. It look pretty now, but it sure soon will change.
Girl, I hear some thunder.
Golly! Look at that water, boy! Woo, Lord!
Dog, you see how hot it is?
Ooh, be with us, Lord, please. Oh, let's water coming through the windows. Hey, help us get off the roof, man. You're a real hero, boy. We under siege, truly under siege. Everybody done lost everything around here. Now you have seen what Katrina has done to us. She has stuck us in her attic. I'm running out of juice, too. These houses have not been inspected yet. There could be dead people right now as we speak, because the National Guard, they have not been here. And it's 2 weeks after the hurricane.
Okay, so that is a movie, basically that these filmmakers discovered this woman, and she was in a FEMA camp, and she approached them and she said, I have footage, home footage, basically, of me and my family in the storm. And the filmmakers then used their sort of platform, their technical ability, et cetera, to basically help her tell her story, right? So the story is very much, the documentary is very much from her perspective, and these filmmakers are basically using the film as a way to kind of get her story out there. What was it like? What are the challenges? What are what is the unique situation of being in that storm? And from that community, and also the aftermath. Most of the film, it's kind of interesting because the beginning of the film is a lot of her home video of being in the attic, of being rescued from her attic with her family, and then journeying outside of New Orleans like so many people did at that time, and winding up in a FEMA camp. And then the second half of the film is really where the filmmakers pick up with their cameras, their camera crew, their resources, and follow her and her family around as they try to sort of put their life back together after this tragedy. And so again, the viewpoint is kind of the most important thing. There is a plot, there are characters, and there is a background, but the viewpoint is very important. Okay, so now the very last thing I want to go over is a phenomenon that I think is absolutely fascinating within the world of documentary film. And that's this phenomenon of someone trying to make, let's say, a character piece, trying to make, let's say, a narrative piece, and finding that it's not working. And then finally saying, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a point of view piece. It's going to be about my journey, my perspective of what it's like to try to make this film. Okay, that's a very popular, some people might think, well, that's cheating. You know, you can't make a film about making a film. But I would say they're pretty good sometimes. The most famous person, if you go back to my very first lecture on documentary film about the styles, is Ross McElway, who made Sherman's March. And Sherman's March was a film where he had a grant to make a film, and then he kind of got writer's block, and he wound up making a film about himself. This is a film called The Amazing Jonathan Documentary, which you can watch on Hulu. And this is another one that I saw at Sundance one year, and me and my companions just thought it was absolutely great. And funny enough, I ran into this filmmaker at Kinko's about a month ago. So he's a local here. He's just a normal guy, just a regular guy, just like you or me. Okay, so I'm going to show you the trailer, and then I'm going to introduce a scene or two that I'm going to show from the film.
Nothing is real. Can you trust anything that the magician does.
Do you remember the first email you ever sent to me?
No.
It's very short, very simple. So it ends with, if we just stick to the truth.
What's your point to this?
What are you saying, Brad?
Put your hands together for Amazing Jonathan.
The Amazing Jonathan sort of deconstructed magic.
He was like a rebel magician. I loved him.
I performed in over 100 TV shows, made millions of dollars, and everything came crashing down when I was told I had a year to live. It's not a joke. So,
my diagnosis with a heart problem was years ago. I'm overdue.
What if he died on stage with people laughing because they thought it was part of his bit?
Do you think there's any chance he's fabricating his diagnosis?
So that's an introduction to the character, right? So he starts out, this filmmaker starts out saying, I want to make a film, a character piece about this guy named the Amazing Jonathan. And we get a little picture of he's this kind of quirky magician, comedian. He does these live shows. And then the twist, of course, is that he has a disease and he only has a year to live. By the time Ben, the filmmaker, begins making this film, it's been a few years since his diagnosis. And of course, he didn't die in a year. He managed to survive. And then things start to get weird for Ben, and he runs into challenges. Any kind of a film that you're trying to make, any kind of a project that you're trying to make, you're going to run into challenges. And his challenges turned out to be pretty serious for his project. And the question was whether or not he was even going to be able to finish. And so what he wound up with is what I'm going to show you now.
The struggles he's gone through of late, and the fact that he is standing here on stage for you shortly tonight is truly amazing. Yeah. Would you now sit back, relax, and enjoy the Amazing Jonathan show.
Let's start with a trick. You have a handkerchief?
Do you have a handkerchief? You, sir, with the blue in the front.
Something on your nose. Just do this. Yeah, cool. All right. I drink it all the time. I want to take my clothes off and run around. That prevents me from streaking.
This prevents streaking. This prevents streaking.
It's good stuff.
Check him out.
I'm gonna go back out. I'm gonna give fans one more run, you know?
What do you mean he's coming back? Is he better? Is he still sick?
Try to catch him before he's gone.
The Amazing Jonathan.
Tickets are still available.
Hey. So we're having two crews, huh? I checked into them, and they've got like amazing credentials. So they've won 2 Academy Awards.
Final boarding call defining the boarding passengers Acevedo, Harris, and Purpura. Gate 7 for boarding. Their aircraft is now ready for departure.
Ben. How are you, buddy?
How's it going? How you feeling?
Well, I feel all right today, but I mean, the last few days I felt really bad.
How's it going?
I haven't slept. I'm very tired and frustrated.
No, where's Jason? Hey, Jason. How you doing?
Yeah, I don't want to be
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Stop 2, serving American Airlines Priority Access, American Airlines Credit Union,
I played this play.
Okay. All right. So this is a classic move, okay, in the point of view documentary. And it's when things start to go south for you as a filmmaker. And then all of a sudden, boop, you put yourself in the film. And so that was the moment, right, when he recorded that conversation. And, that's part to his credit. He recorded everything. The conversation where the amazing Jonathan says, it's going to be kind of cool to have another crew there, huh? So now we've got a wrinkle in the plot. Okay, so we've gone from a character piece. It could have been a narrative. It could have been a character piece, right? It could have been a story about Jonathan's last year of life or years of life, or more of a character piece. And that's kind of what it was shaping up to be. It was like, who is this guy, Jonathan? What is it about his life that's interesting? But now we have this wrinkle where someone else is coming in to document the amazing Jonathan. And of course, what happens? Your attention is immediately riveted by that fact. Now you want to know what's going to happen. Is Ben going to be able to finish his film? That's the dramatic question. Now, it's not so much. I mean, it's still there. Again, these things are all present, but it's not so much about what's going to happen to the amazing Jonathan as is Ben going to be able to finish his film. So what he's done is he's added this point of view layer on top of what was initially a character piece. Okay, so let's keep going.
20 years ago, Jay Leno used to play this place. I mean, this place has been played by everybody.
How did your meeting go with the other film crew?
To be honest, it's interesting. Trying to, suss it out. There's two documentary crews making a documentary with the same subject.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is they're huge. We should let them release theirs, and then you should come in on a swoop on the success of that one. We can get a lot better interest on this documentary than we could if we went second or went first.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure about that.
I am.
The thing is that they didn't hold anything for this at all. Also, I don't know what the deal is with the other crew because originally we thought it was just one, just because there are so few positions.
Yeah, well, being that we're here, I guess you haven't spoken to the other crew, right? I'll be up here, Scott, you're down there, and we'll lock that.
Is that where you want to be? Do you want to be?
Film something in here before the show, and then I'll get out of here and you can come back in. Did you get what you need?
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Hey, guy, you're real other camera guy.
Excited for the show tonight.
Like a hurricane. Good morning, this is Lauren Wally with our special guest, the amazing Jonathan.
How you doing?
Good, Lauren.
You're looking pretty good because the last time I saw you, Jonathan, you told me I wasn't ever going to see you again.
Yeah, I have to retract that to everybody now. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Just don't ever say you're down and out until you're down and out.
Completely commercial free. Good morning
Good
and
morning.
hello and how are you?
I'm fine. Yourself?
Good. We gotta get you set up with a microphone here. Now wait a minute. You got a whole camera with you. You just
Yeah, well,
pop
we're
right into
we're doing.
You're doing a documentary?
Yeah. No, I got 2 documentary crews this week, and this is Ben, and then we have the other really important camera crew. I've done Man on a Wire. Have you seen that documentary?
Yes.
Searching
The
for
guy
Sugarman.
who crossed the wire between
Yeah.
the World Trade Centers.
Right.
The French guy. Yeah.
So yeah,
Amazing.
they won 2 Academy Awards. 2, Ben. 2.
I appreciate you all coming out tonight to see the show again. It's been a real kick for me to do.
Hi.
What will the amazing Jonathan do with?
Okay, so as you can see, Ben has now completely committed to showing his relationship, his point of view of what it's like to try to make a film about the amazing Jonathan when the amazing Jonathan apparently doesn't really care about him. And so now we come to the obligatory scene for this genre. You might say it's the genre of film about filmmakers trying to make films, and that is what? That's when the filmmaker talks to their own parents. I think it's always a fascinating addition to these because there's a sense that the parents represent judgment of how you're doing in your life. And there's always this sort of quintessential angst, quintessential doubt of the artist. Of am I significant? Is what I'm doing legitimate? And so there's always this scene where they're trying to process their worth and their value with the scene with the parents. So let's watch a little bit more.
Without you, is he gonna miss you? Cause like you guys have been hanging together, and now it's time for you to go home, I guess.
I don't think so.
Okay.
How long is the drive?
About an hour.
Good.
That's mine. Why does my food taste better than your food?
So what do you know about the project? What have I told you?
I think you're documenting Jonathan's life and apparently that he's been ill.
Not long ago, he let me know that there is another documentary crew making a documentary about him.
Oh.
So
we could say the more the merrier here.
where once I was making a documentary out of love and art, now there's...
Now you have competitors. There's competition. How does that affect you? Does it, or does it? Should it?
All good questions.
At some point, he's going to die, and things will get really interesting.
Okay, well, that could be the end point. It could maybe not be the end point if he dies, but...
What's your observation? Are those guys good? Are they capable?
Well...
Can they pull it off? They have a good story to tell? What story are they telling?
It doesn't...
What story are you telling?
It's not that...
What story is anybody? What is the story here? No, are they good? Cut.
I just got done working a cruise ship. These are the oldest people you've ever seen in your life.
How's it going? I'm Ben.
Ben, Chad, how you doing?
How you doing?
Good. Are you just handheld roaming then?
Sorry, who are you?
Chad Taylor.
Yeah, so what are you filming for?
I'm making a documentary, been working on it for a couple of years. I didn't know you guys were. Have you been doing this tour with him then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I had no idea of that either. So I'm not that worried that ours would conflict or anything.
Yeah.
But hearing there's a whole nother crew. He's the guy who gave us both permission, so here we are.
Hey. I didn't think you were coming. You know, there's another documentary guy doing it. Chad's the original one for years ago. He's been working on this for years.
These are people who put off taking their vacation until their last week on Earth.
Let's give it up for the amazing Jonathan!
History of the Chinese linking rings. As you can see, they're already linked. That's a time saver.
start. I'll just start by just saying, how did it feel up there?
How did it look?
It looked good to me. And how does it feel as compared to prior? How's it feeling back on stage? How's the show feel compared to that?
It felt good. It was fun.
And then, are you shooting 4K or regular or 1080?
4K.
You are shooting 4K.
No.
Nice.
How was it for you? How was it for you?
Decent.
Well, yeah, feel free, totally do what you want in the green room and all that.
Doc?
I am actually. Yes.
I shot a doc following Bert Kreischer, stand-up comic.
Actually, we have 2 different projects.
Two different projects. Oh. A lot of competing docs.
When did you start?
16 December of 2014.
How? Really?
2 years ago in December.
You got work.
Yeah.
It's such a compelling story, especially now that he's like come back. It's
Right.
pretty good for me. Would you be willing to sign a release? In
for
case
sure.
I end up wanting to use a snippet of you?
Yeah.
I'd love it. I appreciate it.
There we go.
Howdy, man.
Hello, Ben.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Nice to see.
Okay. So now we have another wrinkle in the project, and that's the existence of a third documentary. And this is going to keep happening. There's going to be a fourth documentary. We're not going to get that far here, but if you ever do, go watch the movie. But isn't it interesting, though? So now we're seeing, from Ben's point of view, what it's like to try to make a documentary about people, and it's interesting stuff. It's everything that he's doing in the green room. It's competing for spots, and now we're really getting into a nice commentary on the human condition, on what it is to have hopes and goals and dreams, and what it is to try to accomplish something. In this case, he's following the interesting things wherever it leads. Now, Werner Herzog, in his Rogue Film School, famous documentarian Werner Herzog, calls it filmmaking as a journey on foot. The idea is that you're starting out and you're thinking, well, this is probably going to be interesting, but you never know what's going to happen along the way, and maybe there'll be something more interesting. Kind of like what Banksy said earlier, this guy Terry turned out to be more interesting than me, so now the film's about him, right? And so, what about Chad? Maybe Chad is an interesting character.
See ya. A big reason that I'm here is to apologize to you for doing to you what the other documentary crew did to me. Come in on someone else's turf when
As much as I appreciate that, I would say no apology necessary, because number one, he didn't know I was there. But even if you did know I was there, as long as he gave permission, that's really all you need, in my opinion. If he wants to do 100 documentaries next month, all I can do is hope mine's more interesting, So as much as I appreciate the apology, I really feel there's no need.
Are you a full-time documentarian, or what is it that you consider your career?
No, my main job is juggling chainsaws. I do a comedy and juggling show. That's my main gig.
Sporting events around the country, as well as television shows around the world.
Yes, last night I met another guy making a documentary on Jonathan. He's unfaithful to you already. So what does it matter if he's unfaithful to you with multiple people? I don't know if it's over, if I should give up. At this point, you just call it, right? You have to keep going. Just giving up is guaranteeing that this is all a complete failure. So you can defer your failure for another year by keeping on going. But if you give up today, you know for sure that this has been a failure and you failed. Can you talk to me about, just tell me how much of a failure I am? I appreciate it. It's true though. It's like if I want to see a film on Amazing Jonathan, I can now watch 2 or 3 others. So how do you make this story unique? You have to be open to every single story, including your own. What interested you in a dying magician, and why?
Okay, so that's a good example of a creative use of the viewpoint style. Okay, so what have we talked about today? All right, narrative is the what, characters the who, atmosphere is the where, viewpoint is who's telling the story. Now, hopefully I've made the case to you. Hopefully this is helpful to you to know whether or not your film is narrative-based, character-based, atmosphere-based, or viewpoint-based. And that's going to inform a lot of your decisions. Now, a lot of these things that I talk about, they're all designed to sort of help you whittle down the decision tree so that the decisions that you're making, when you could shoot this or shoot that, you could put this scene in, you put that scene in, you can whittle all that down if you're a little bit more clear in your own mind as to what type of film you're making. So thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you next time.